Thank you, choir. I would also like to acknowledge that here on the communion table, we have Ukrainian Easter eggs, thanks to Alice Duban. And so we have one more tangible reminder of how the Ukrainian people are in our prayers today. Our gospel reading is from the book of John, chapter 9, verses 1 to 41. And it's a long reading, although it's packed with drama, so it actually moves along pretty quickly. My original plan was to break the reading up into scenes and to have a sermon offer a brief commentary on each scene. And I'm still trying to do that. But instead, the commentary piece will end in a meditation, a brief meditation, in which we're again invited to hold our candles in a moment of prayer. Now, we need to know the backstory, not only for today's story, but for the entire Gospel of John, and indeed, all four of the Gospels. The backstory is this, that in the year 70 of the Common Era, the Roman army laid siege to Jerusalem and utterly destroyed the temple. The center of Judaism was suddenly gone. Now, when Jesus had his ministry with his disciples in the oral tradition, that was in a time of occupation. But when the Gospels themselves were written, it wasn't just occupation. It was the aftermath of conquest and destruction. And those who first heard these gospel stories were hearing it with those ears as a people who had witnessed the worst, as a people who were still traumatized. As there were televised images this week of beautiful Orthodox churches in Kyiv, with soldiers and others lighting candles and praying, I found myself thinking about the temple in Jerusalem. How much longer would the edifices of those beautiful church buildings still stand? I know the church itself will outlive whatever building it's housed in. But I worry about the destruction of Kyiv and all the cities in Ukraine. I can only try to begin to imagine. So this is scene one. It's the unexpected miracle. And this is chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. That's the end of scene one. In all honesty, the first thing I notice is that Jesus rubbed mud on someone's eyes without asking permission first. Did you notice that? Many times in the gospel stories, people come to Jesus asking for a healing. This man did not. And all of a sudden, a stranger is putting mud on his eyes. And this is appropriate, I guess, because Jesus does take the initiative. And I like the NRSV translation, the man who is blind from birth, not the blind man. The fact that this man is unsighted is not the most important distinguishing characteristic about him. The gospel story should not be read as privileging people with sight over people without sight, just as the gospel's frequent references to light and darkness should not be read as privileging people with lighter skin over people with darker skin. In the Gospel of John, seeing, or the ability to understand more easily when there is light enough to illumine the path, is first and foremost a metaphor about understanding, about growing understanding, whether or not we recognize the things that are most important, as opposed to choosing not to see them or to ignore them. And this first scene of the unexpected miracle reminds me of a poem by Anne Weems, who, in addition to being a poet and an author, is also a ruling elder in the Presbyterian Church USA. The poem is titled, "I No Longer Pray for Peace." On the edge of war, 1 foot already in, I no longer pray for peace, I pray for miracles. I pray that stone hearts will turn to tender-heartedness, and evil intentions will turn to mercifulness, and all the soldiers already deployed will be snatched out of harm's way, and the whole world will be astounded onto its knees. I pray that all the God talk will take bones and stand up and shed its cloak of faithlessness and walk again in its powerful truth. I pray that the whole world might sit down together and share its bread and its wine. Some say there is no hope. But then I've always applauded the holy fools who never seem to give up on the scandalousness of our faith, that we are loved by God, that we can truly love one another. I no longer pray for peace. I pray for miracles. I invite us now to hold our candles and to pray for the miracle. Pray for the way out of no way. Pray that the heart of an autocrat might yet melt. I invite us to spend a moment praying for the miracle of peace. Scene 2, speaking one's truth, verses 8 to 15. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly, and he expresses his truth. I invite us to hold our candles once again and to pray for those who are speaking their truth, for transgendered kids in Texas who are speaking their truth in the face of an unjust law that would seek to accuse parents of abuse if they try to help their own children through a gender transition. For Black Americans speaking the truth about their experience. For President Zelensky walking the streets of Kyiv and encouraging the people to resist, defying Putin and the Russian military, turning down offers of rescue. Hold your candle and pray for all these, including yourselves, who are called upon to speak your truth. Scene 3, the need for greater understanding. And here I'm going to skip down to verse 18 and continue through verse 23. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that now he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. And there ends verse 22. The Gospel of John has this unfortunate way of talking about Jews as if Jesus and the disciples were not themselves Jewish. It seems absurd at best and borderline hate speech at worst. It seems akin to the absurdity of Putin calling Zelensky a Nazi, even though Zelensky is Jewish and lost 3 family members in the Holocaust. And through the years, I've tried to translate that phrase as religious leaders, or the temple leaders, or Judeans, contrasting them with the Galileans. But the text really does say the Jews. And this is why I hesitate to say that John is my favorite gospel. And I don't know whether this helps or not. But in the Gospel of John, I think you have to hear this phrase, the Jews, as a kind of code language for different sides in a church fight. The Gospel was written during that difficult, perilous time after the destruction of the temple. As I said a moment ago, the temple had been the very center of Judaism. It had been rebuilt after the Babylonians had destroyed it. And now it's been destroyed again. And without the temple, what is the way forward? How does a conquered and dejected people move forward? For the Pharisees, the way forward was to recommit themselves to the Torah, to the law of Moses. And the Pharisees are the spiritual ancestors of what would eventually become rabbinical Judaism. And for the Jews who trusted in Jesus, the way forward was to embrace Jesus as God's anointed, the Messiah. And as I said, many scholars do hypothesize that this was a time of kind of a bitter church fight or synagogue fight. And as of yet, the gospel writer knows nothing of the horrible legacy of anti-Semitism to follow. And I don't know if that helps or not. I think that in the next life, we have every right to get the gospel writer in a corner and ask, what were you thinking? Could you not have foreseen how these words would be used? But when I read through the grand themes of the gospel as a whole, I really do hear an end to us versus them thinking. I hear the Gospel of John saying that God so loved the world, period. Not part of the world, not just the Christian part of the world, but the world. And I hear the Gospel of John quoting Jesus in chapter 12 when Jesus says that when I am lifted up, will draw the whole world to me. And that word is even more expansive than that. It's really saying the universe. I will draw everything together, all people, all creation, to me. As Anne Weems said, the scandalousness of our faith is that we are loved by God and that we can truly love one another. And that's not unique to Christianity, and it doesn't need to be. It's just the truth. We have a long, long way to go in fostering a greater understanding of each other, of those whose history and beliefs are different from ours in significant ways. And so I invite us now to hold our candle and to pray for greater understanding. Scene 4, the time is now. Now, this is not a new scene, but it's a reiteration of what we've already heard in verses 3 and 5. Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And there ends verse 5. In the original Greek text, there were not any punctuation marks. When you see punctuation marks in English translation, they are always an act of interpretation. And sometimes that act of interpretation makes a big difference. Perhaps verses 3 and 4 should be punctuated this way. Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind, period." He was simply born blind. We don't have to speculate why, and it's probably better that we not speculate at all. And if you haven't yet read Kate Bowler's book, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, you need to read it. It's a beautiful meditation on her own cancer survival story and on this very toxic idea that all the bad things that happen to you must be for some special reason that God has. That doesn't have to be what it is at all. So if we put a period after he was born blind, then the next sentence reads, "So that God's works might be revealed in him, comma, we must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work." The time to respond is now. Earlier this week, in an email thread with the Church and Society Committee, Susan Polo shared the following poem. "We lived happily during the war," by Ilya Kaminsky. "And when they bombed other people's houses, we protested, but not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed. Around my bed, America was falling. Inside, invisible house by invisible house by invisible house. I took a chair outside and watched the sun. In the 6th month of a disastrous reign in the house of money, in the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money, our great country of money, we, forgive us, lived happily during the war." I now invite you to hold your candle and to think both of practical ways that you can help and also the urgency of doing this. And perhaps you feel called to study the situation at greater depth so that you can have a better understanding. Perhaps you feel called to donate financially to UNICEF or Doctors Without Borders or Voices of Children or Save the Children or the International Red Cross or to churches in that region. Hold your candle, remembering that we have to work now while it is still day. Hold your candle and ponder how you will stand up to this present moment. All glory and praise be to our God. Amen.